The reports are that King Charles has vowed to protect Beatrice and Eugenie, whereas Sarah Ferguson, faces life without her title, Duchess of York.
Royal watchers thought they had seen every scandal the monarchy could possibly survive, but this one feels different, darker, personal. Because the latest shockwave exploding through the House of York isn't about distant cousins, political whispers, or tabloids exaggerating palace gossip. No. This time, the storm is inside the family itself. And at the center of it all sits an almost unbelievable accusation. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie preparing to sue their own mother, Sarah Ferguson, for a staggering $50 million. The daughters, suing the Duchess who raised them, the same woman who once described their bond as unbreakable. So what happened behind those royal gates that could fracture a family so completely? At first glance, the story seemed to begin with a moment that stunned the world. February 19th, 2026. A cold morning in Norfolk, cameras waiting outside a quiet police station captured an image that instantly ricocheted across global headlines. Prince Andrew, handcuffed, escorted through the doors at precisely 9:15 a.m. The York name suddenly dragged back into a legal nightmare. But while the public focused on Andrew's arrest, something far stranger was unfolding quietly behind the scenes. Someone else connected to the York dynasty had already disappeared. Sarah Ferguson was gone, completely. No warning, no explanation, just silence. And the deeper investigators looked, the stranger things became. Bank accounts that once showed steady movement suddenly froze into silence. Digital records altered. Travel trails that normally follow someone as famous as the Duchess simply vanished. No airport logs, no verified destinations. It was as if someone had methodically erased her footprints before the storm even began. That alone raised a chilling possibility. This wasn't panic. This wasn't a desperate escape. Every sign suggested preparation. Someone had seen the storm coming long before February ever arrived. Inside Buckingham Palace corridors, whispers reportedly spread fast. Because if Andrew's arrest was the explosion everyone saw, Sarah Ferguson's disappearance was the quiet mystery nobody could explain. And mysteries inside royal families rarely stay quiet for long. Historians quickly began comparing the tension to some of the monarchy's most infamous crises. Even the scandal of King Edward VIII abandoning the throne suddenly resurfaced in conversations. Could the York saga really rival that level of royal chaos? Then investigators stumbled onto something even more unsettling. The timeline didn't begin in 2026 at all. It appeared to start months earlier, September 11th, 2025. A simple social media post from Sarah Ferguson. Polite, warm, completely ordinary on the surface. Yet inside certain royal circles, the message triggered quiet concern. Because some believed it read less like a friendly update and more like a farewell hidden in plain sight. 3 nights later, something happened that few people noticed at the time. At exactly 11:42 p.m. on September 14th, a heavily armored Range Rover Sentinel rolled slowly out of Windsor Great Park through the Bishopsgate exit. Security logs later confirmed the vehicle leaving the estate, but here's the detail that now chills investigators. The car never appeared on the return registry. No luggage, no entourage, just one passenger sitting inside the dark glass. Sarah Ferguson, staring out at a world she might have already known she was leaving behind. According to hushed staff recollections, there was one final moment before that departure. Alone in a drawing room, the Duchess reportedly held a disposable phone, her voice low, urgent. On the other end of that line, Princess Beatrice. The conversation was brief, but fragments overheard nearby raised disturbing questions. Words like ledgers, contracts, and fears she couldn't answer certain questions anymore. By sunrise the next morning, the Duchess of York had vanished from public life. A 30-room residence suddenly quiet, corridors echoing with uncertainty. And months later, when a grainy photograph surfaced from Doha showing a mysterious woman in a wide-brimmed hat standing behind Princess Eugenie at an art fair, facial recognition reportedly suggested a 98% match with Sarah Ferguson, which raises a haunting question. If she wasn't hiding, but watching from the shadows, what exactly was she preparing for? Because the deeper investigators dug, the more one terrifying possibility emerged. The York family crisis was never just about Prince Andrew. It was about something bigger, something buried in millions of pages of Epstein records, and secrets that may have finally pushed 2 royal daughters to do the unthinkable, sue their own mother. And if that lawsuit truly goes forward, the next chapter of this royal scandal may be even more explosive. As investigators began combing through what insiders described described as the Epstein York Communications Archive, the scale of what they uncovered sent quiet shockwaves through legal circles on both sides of the Atlantic. This was not a small folder of forgotten correspondence or a handful of embarrassing emails. The disclosure contained an enormous digital mountain of evidence, more than 3,142,000 pages of messages, financial records, timestamps, travel logs, and encrypted exchanges stretching across more than a decade. And buried within those millions of pages was a pattern that suddenly made Sarah Ferguson's disappearance look less like coincidence and more like strategy. According to analysts studying the records, the story appears to trace back to the financial crisis that gripped the Duchess as early as 2009. Despite the glamour associated with royal titles, Ferguson's personal finances had been spiraling for years. By that time, her reported debts had climbed past £23 million across several British banks, leaving creditors circling and options disappearing fast. That was the moment when Jeffrey Epstein entered the picture, not merely as a controversial acquaintance, but as a man offering something far more valuable than social company, money, influence, and solutions. What investigators later described as an access for debt loop allegedly began during that period. It started with small financial relief payments that eased the Duchess's immediate pressure, but nothing in that arrangement came without expectations. According to analysts examining the files, Epstein appeared to gain something that even billionaires struggled to obtain: proximity to the royal world, invitations to gatherings, introductions within elite circles, and the prestige of being associated with the monarchy carried a value far beyond money. Over time, the exchanges allegedly deepened as Ferguson's financial troubles continued. Archived emails dated March 2010 reportedly show a tone of gratitude so personal that some investigators interpreted it as evidence of dependency rather than simple friendship. In one message, she thanked Epstein in language that sounded less like polite appreciation and more like relief from someone drowning in financial pressure. But the emails were only the beginning. Travel records uncovered something that stunned investigators even more. Just 5 days after Epstein completed his 2009 jail sentence for soliciting a minor, Ferguson reportedly boarded a flight to Palm Beach to visit him. The timing alone raised immediate questions. Only 120 hours had passed since his release. Even more unsettling was who accompanied her on that trip. According to witness accounts referenced in the archive, the Duchess brought her daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, who were then only 20 and 19 years old. What happened during that visit has never been fully clarified, but the documents suggest the relationship between Ferguson and Epstein blurred the lines between personal loyalty, financial survival, and social access in ways that investigators are still struggling to untangle. For Beatrice and Eugenie, discovering these records years later reportedly felt less like reading legal files and more like uncovering a hidden version of their own childhood. Sources close to the situation say the emotional impact was immediate and devastating. Suddenly, ordinary memories, family trips, introductions to friends, casual encounters at private gatherings began to look different when viewed through the lens of the Epstein investigation. What once seemed like harmless social moments now appeared connected to a network of influence and financial desperation they never understood at the time. That realization reportedly triggered the moment everything changed. Within days of reviewing the resurfaced documents, the sisters allegedly held a confidential video call with Prince William that lasted nearly 3 hours. According to insiders, the conversation was blunt. If the investigation widened and the York name remained tied too closely to the Epstein scandal, the consequences could damage not only the sisters' reputations, but their position within the royal structure itself. The message delivered during that call was reportedly clear: distance yourselves legally from the controversy or risk being pulled into it. It was an agonizing choice. Loyalty to family had defined much of their lives, but the legal storm gathering around their parents threatened to drag them into battles they never created. That is when whispers began circulating through London's legal community about a possible lawsuit, one that would frame the princesses not as accomplices, but as victims of parental negligence, whose lives were placed under the shadow of decisions they never controlled. On February 27, 2026, that possibility reportedly transformed into action when legal representatives connected to the sisters quietly filed a notice of intent with the High Court's Civil Division, signaling preparation for a claim that could seek damages as high as $50 million. For royal watchers, the implications were staggering. The same family that once proudly described itself as the York tripod, 3 points holding each other upright through every scandal, now appeared to be collapsing under the weight of secrets that had been buried for years. Meanwhile, far from London, Sarah Ferguson remained hidden somewhere beyond the reach of familiar royal corridors. Reports suggest she relocated financial assets months earlier and secured a special Gulf visa that allowed her to reside quietly in the Middle East while the crisis unfolded back home. Critics see that move as evidence she anticipated the storm long before it erupted. Supporters argue it may have been a desperate attempt to escape a scandal that had already spiraled beyond control. But one truth has become impossible to ignore. The York dynasty that once seemed permanently anchored within the British monarchy now hangs in a fragile balance between legal battles, fractured loyalties, and revelations that refuse to stay buried. And as more pages from the massive Epstein archive continue to surface piece by piece, the tension surrounding this story only grows heavier. Because the lawsuit that could tear a mother and daughters apart may not be the final chapter at all. It may only be the opening move in a much larger reckoning that is still unfolding.